women and children hostage, though it is
Jet lag, but not bad.
Okay, how was Selma?
Selma was very good. The weather was tremendous. The experience was great. I think folks are pleased. I'm not sure we got enough clarity on calls to action, but we'll have to follow up on that probably.
Never really do down there.
Says Russian forces have
Unfortunately.
intensified shelling of cities in
But
Ukraine's center, north, and south, sending attempts
not morning. So there we go.
with Ukrainian leaders.
Yeah.
It has definitely become
Vladimir Putin
another continent.
saying Moscow.
So, but okay. Well, it's great.
Third round of talks between both sides
Likewise.
is planned for today.
You know what? We're going to be talking. I was because I didn't even know if you're going to be on the show today, but we're going to be talking about how I'm going to have. Oh goodness, Richard Prince, veteran journalist, brilliant. Have you ever tried your journals? If not, you should. He covers diversity in corporate media. Black fellow, brilliant guy. And I'm going to have Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. We're going to be looking at the reporting of Ukraine because, the corporate media have come under attack for really racist observations that a lot of their correspondents have made. And even one of the Ukrainian ministers said, he's very distressed because these are blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. This is not supposed to happen to them. Would you like to weigh in on that at 8 o'clock our time, 8 o'clock your time, 7 o'clock our time?
With what's going to happen and what's
Normally I would love to. I've got a hearing this morning on top of. That's the only reason I came back so I could be present. Otherwise,
yeah, I would have asked. Well, I mean, obviously you couldn't do it, but so that that was the only thing that made that I was reluctant because I know you've got a few different schedules.
Rather give out awards, performance than
typically the schedule in the morning is pretty tame. This week this is kind of an outlier because they're getting back from so much delay because of COVID in the courts.
Mm-hmm. Well,
everybody got so used to streaming
everything's backed up.
The past couple years, I don't think it's going to be strange at all.
I'm Archie Zaraletta.
Okay.
WCPT
Devin
and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk,
Devin?
where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
Some roads are slippery after that first round of winter precipitation overnight. Warm weather is approaching on the far western suburbs. Looking north
Devin?
on 173 in Wadsworth, there's a rollover crash on 173 at Kilbourne. Outbound Kennedy traffic is heavy approaching Randolph. There was a crash which had a couple of lanes blocked. Vehicles have been relocated to Lake Street. Traffic still stuffy. Starting on the inbound Bryant with the delays from the Stevenson. Randolph on the outbound Kennedy. Trip time on the Ryan, 9 minutes from 90 minutes to downtown. Kennedy, 21 minutes from downtown to O'Hare. Inbound trip time is 17 minutes.
Hey everybody, how you doing? It's so good to be with you today. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you had a restful one. And everybody, please like and share. Join Dave over there on the Santita Jackson YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please get on over there and
Ukraine was invaded last month.
Okay, thank you. Clyde, how you doing?
And the former press
Angela, Carol, not me, out there in LA. Sending you much love, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about, we're going to get a follow up on what happened in Selma. The Jubilee celebration, the 57th anniversary commemoration of the Selma to Montgomery March. Of course, we lost Reverend James Reeb, Jimmy Lee Jackson, Viola Liuzzo, so many martyrs who really gave us the right to vote, and something that we're fighting for right now. I'm going to ask, of course, I have to ask Reverend
Oh,
Dr.
yeah.
Yuri about
Baseball
that
is on
because he
strike,
just
too,
returned.
and
But
I
we're going to have
really
Gerald
need my
Briggs from
White
the
Sox back. American
NAACP
Virtual
out of
Mortgage
Atlanta
Eagle has the
to
opportunity
talk
to
to
lend
us
in
about
all
that
sports and
as we continue to
MLS
push
61
for
60.
Because
um,
facts matter.
for an
You're
executive
listening to
order, right?
WCPT 820.
And so there's that. And then we're going to be talking about the racism in the coverage of the Ukraine conflict. You know, one of the Ukrainian ministers said that, you know, this is happening to blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. Wow. Make this stuff up, but you gotta pay attention to all of it, right? So.
We can change the world. Change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Chapter.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Hope you've had a wonderful weekend. It's Monday, March 7th. 2022. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT. We used to be Air America, but today we're WCPT, everybody. Chicago's largest progressive, well, actually the progressive talk, largest progressive talk, and AM 90, the voices of progressive Minnesota. My family to the north, with Reverend McAfee and Gary and Sounds of Blackness and Spike Moss and all these wonderful people. And of course, we have our great senators up there, and we have Ilhan Omar, Senator Amy Klobuchar. All of them are friends of the show. So we have got to talk today about. We're going to have good news, but we want to talk about the racism that we see in the coverage in this Ukraine conflict as it continues to widen. And we're also going to be looking at what's happened in Selma and where we stand with the vote, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 37 degrees, snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 30 degrees, partly cloudy. Devin, I'm getting some feedback. And in the NBA, the Trailblazers will be playing the Timberwolves tonight. The Bulls will be facing off against the 76ers. In the NHL, it was quite active yesterday. Chicago fell to the Lightning. The Lightning 6, Chicago 3. And then the Wild, well, they fell to the Stars. The Stars 6, the Wild 3, everybody. American Express is the latest credit card company to end it following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Visa and MasterCard made similar, and analysts say that there's a high risk that you will face a financial crisis that will push its largest banks to the brink of collapse. A Russian military strike hit an evacuation route in a Kiev suburb yesterday, killing 8 people and 2 children as they tried to flee the invasion. The mayor said, "A family died right in front of my eyes," sending them many, many, many prayers. But guess what? It seems that President Biden is getting a bounce out of this. According to this NPR PBS NewsHour Marist National poll, he's gotten quite the bounce. 47% of Americans approve of how he is handling this crisis in Ukraine. A majority of Americans approve of how he's handling, actually, the situation in Ukraine. It's up 18 points from last week from 34%, to 52%. Overall, he's got a 47% approval rating. So, what do you think about that? I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. Are you surprised that he's getting this wartime bounce? What do you think about it? Just what do you think about it? What do you think about it? Oil prices have soared to their highest level in 13 years today, raising fears about a further spike in inflation that could damage the global economy. Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill are gearing up for a showdown over COVID-19 relief funding this week. House Democrats plan to introduce a massive spending bill as soon as tomorrow that includes roughly $10 billion to help bolster Ukraine, but also tax on about $22.5 billion in the coronavirus relief money that Republicans widely oppose. Now, you're going to get $10 billion to Ukraine, but $22.5 billion to American people. It's a fight. That's interesting. And in the meantime, according to this report, U.S. Marines and veterans from all parts of the service joining the fight in Ukraine. That's right, everybody. According to this MSN report, more and more American veterans are coming out of retirement, and they are joining the fight in Ukraine. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-778. In the meantime, Russia is recruiting Syrians for urban combat in Ukraine. It just keeps on going. And guess what? The truckers are here in the United States. Even more than half of their funding, just a little more than half of their funding on the GoFundMe pages up in Canada, getting support from Americans. Well, now the trucks are circling Washington, D.C. Pastor Todd Urey, down in your neck of the woods. The Beltway literally encircles Washington, D.C. That ought to be very interesting. How are you today?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I'm trying to figure out how we're able to tell. Beltway traffic can be kind of tricky anyway. So
kind of
gridlock on, it's kind of like joining the party, but we'll see how that kind of pans out. But yeah, there's a whole lot going on. You've got a lot to talk about this week. It sounds like.
Yes.
The coming out of retirement piece to be invited to join this international corps that President Zelensky has 2 and 4 is going to be an interesting discussion as well, because I know there are a lot of folks who feel kind of lost. They've been in combat, been in urban combat over in the Middle East. This is kind of an invitation, and what happens not only to joining the force, but what happens to the folks that have not necessarily gotten the transitional services to find it appealing to go back into combat. What does that mean for us? So that's going to be interesting. So I'll be tuning in, and I think your friends should tune in too. I'll probably do it while I'm sitting in Beltway traffic watching the truckers.
Bless your heart. What's the good news today?
Here's the good news. Get ready. It's getting ready to hit. Here we go. Good morning, Chicago. Good morning, Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Hey, y'all, time to get up, get moving. Guess what? There's a sign. The sign is URALIVE, alive. Time to put your feet on the floor. Feel the coolness in the tile. Take a deep breath. Fill your lungs with life. Because guess what? You are on an assignment. That assignment is to change the world. As you're getting started, get that morning beverage going, that morning Joe, that orange juice. Don't forget, got to drink that water, stay hydrated so you can be effective as you do what you do. Well, Santita, since you brought up the truckers and this whole driving and gridlock thing, I figured, well, let's talk about signs, SIGNS signs. There are street signs. There are vital signs. I want to kind of use an analogy that we see in this transition. There are life signs. I want you to follow the signs. Following the signs can help make your journey less complicated, more enjoyable, shall we say. And sometimes following the signs will keep you from getting in some trouble, right? There's this joke that is often shared amongst men and women that men tend not to follow the signs. We tend to say we know how we're going to get there. Well, I want to help all of you this morning. Follow the signs. As we have moved into March, while spring is still a few days away, there is this notion called Meteorological Spring. It actually begins on March 1st. It is where you begin to see the signs that spring is already upon us. And so if you pay attention to the details, you'll see there'll be buds on the trees. You may not see anything in them. You'll hear the chirping of the birds changing, even though spring officially will not be here for a few more days. I need you to anticipate that there is a seasonal shift happening for you. And if you follow the life signs, it will help you to kind of change your mood and your outlook about what's about to take place. There are indicators that good things are in store for you. There are transitions that are going to work for you. The efforts that you put in the wintertime are going to begin to bear fruit. Yeah, there it is. But I need you to get excited. Don't wait for the calendar. Look at the indicators around you. to know that there are good things happening for you so that you can make sure you put the best of who you are into your effort today. Look, let me tell you something. The best gift you have is right here. Prepared signs, the sign that you're alive, the sign that you're still persistent, the sign that you've overcome, the sign that you're still passionate about life. Use those signs along with the indicators that there's a shift happening, and lean in to your pursuit of greatness and go out and change the world. And if you do that, somebody else is going to see a sign through you. And guess what? Before you know it, we won't have a traffic jam. There won't be truckers coming to fill up the beltway. But there will be people of passion and possibility pursuing the best they can be and changing the world for the better. I'm excited for you. I'm celebrating you. The signs are there. This is on the horizon. I can't wait to see and hear what you're going to do with the opportunity that's coming. Just know, keep pressing. And it all starts right now, today. Go get them.
And that is the good news. Pastor Todd Yeary, sending you so much love. It's always so great to have you with us. He is, of course, the senior pastor at the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. He's also vice president at Rainbow Push, practicing lawyer. I don't know how he does it all, but he does it all in such a splendid way. Sending you much love, Pastor Todd Yeary. Let's switch tracks to a woman you introduced us to, and she's been a real blessing in our lives, Pastor Yeary. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and indeed she is an epidemiologist. Public health is her thing. Let's get right into it, because I came across a study that should not be shocking. In fact, you had virtually the same results in England when they were looking at their healthcare system, Dr. Fur Holden. There are real disparities, racial disparities in healthcare. Black and brown people and people of color are not treated as well, and they don't feel as well. They don't feel as good about their health care. When they're scheduling an appointment, they feel that they experience bias. When they're checking for an appointment, when they're in their appointments, they don't feel as respected. When they're leaving their appointments, on their follow-up calls. Let's go back, because doctors and people like you are looking for answers. I mean, even as we're seeing that patients prefer doctors of the same race and ethnicity. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because people who come from your background might understand you just a little bit better? I mean, what is it? And what is this bias in healthcare?
So those are a lot of questions. So I'm going to just take one at a time. We'll start with the preference that people have. It's not something that's new to healthcare. And clearly, I think if anybody had a choice, you would want just the best physician available, right? Like, that's what most people want. You want the best. So if you had your choice, doctor, most people will say, I want the best doctor. Right? There is so much bias, and the bias goes unchecked bias, and sometimes it's unconscious or hidden bias. It's bias that people bring that they don't even realize they have, but people experience. The patients and the populations that they serve, they experience it. And so this isn't a new concept. I think it might have been Healthy People 2010, which came out predictably around 2005, was, I think, the first sort of federal guidance document that said we got to make a goal to get more Black and brown and underrepresented minority doctors. Why? Because we have people of those same backgrounds as consumers in the healthcare system, and they don't see themselves reflected in the people that are providing care for them. And the reason that that's relevant is because there is something about shared lived experience. I had this really upsetting experience. My physician, who is double boarded in internal medicine and pediatrics. So she treats both children and adults. You might see that also sometimes with a family medicine doctor. So she very much operates like that. And when we moved to Flint, it was a great practice for me because I had two older adolescents who really don't want to start over with a pediatrician, right? Like, they don't want to be seeing a doctor that's seeing babies and toddlers and have to navigate that in the doctor's office. So having a doctor who was double boarded in peds and medicine was great. Well, when Jordan got Jordan's OBGYN said you should get a pertussis vaccine. That's whooping cough. Because oftentimes it's grandparents who give whooping cough to their grandchildren. And my physician, because she was also Jordan's physician, knew that Jordan was pregnant, never suggested this to me. So when I go to do my annual exam with her, I said, hey, the OBGYN said I should get the pertussis vaccine. What do you think about that, right? Let's go back to this N-nice, right, this adult vaccine schedule. And she's an Indian woman, and she said, well, you know, I didn't think about it, but that's really not on me. That's sort of on you because we think of it as the grandparents' booster. And most people aren't grandparents at 47.
Oh.
And I felt so judged and so disrespected by her. You know, well, my mom actually was a grandma at 35. I have many classmates that I went to school with who are grandparents because they had their children younger. And I looked up the stats. In fact, African-American women have their children a little younger than our white counterparts. Mm-hmm. But the point was how and judgmental for her to say, instead of acknowledging, oh, I didn't think about it, but in fact, you're right. Let's get you that vaccine. And I literally was done with her in that moment. I had other instances with her where I felt like she was just toned down to my lived experience and very culturally insensitive and even now at times inappropriate and offensive. So the thinking is that having somebody who is like you, right? It's why some women will choose and only see a female OBGYN. You know, for me, it seemed odd to have somebody who doesn't have a vagina helping me to maintain mine. So for me, I've always had a female OBGYN. And there's a lot of data that says that people who feel a better sense of connection will have better patient communication. And there's real data to show that people oftentimes will go back and serve in communities that they come from and where their passions are. And all of these things comes. So it's a little bit more nuanced than just same race, provider, and patient, but it really starts to get at the heart of something, which is that people have very valid mistrust and experiences of maltreatment. And we know one of the is with like-matched peers providing care and people who bring cultural sensitivity to the patient-provider interaction.
Would it also be class-driven? That is to say, socioeconomic classifications difference as well.
You mean for the
between the doctor and the patient? I mean, you know how it is. You have gone to school. I've gone to school with a lot of physicians. You know, people who became physicians. But you know, because what it sounded to me as if your doctor was also being classist. You know, racism is a form of classism. Like, wait a minute, only poor people have these children so early, or people like you. I mean, it was a black thing. It was because that's what we will hear, right? And I can see how it also impacted, and it impacted what she was going to offer you in terms of a preventive, a prophylactic, which to me is dangerous, Dr. Deb.
Well, but my biggest problem with her was that was on her.
Yeah.
When you know I'm going to become a grandparent and I'm now going to have frequent contact with an infant who's actually going to be in my home, it doesn't, like whatever thoughts, pre-existing thoughts, there's no standard that says people get this vaccine at this age. You are booster eligible 10 years after your initial dose and 10 years after a booster dose, and it's recommended that you get it. Because most people, we're not attending to the adult vaccine schedule. You know, we talk more about vaccines during the COVID crisis than we ever have. And most adults have never thought about any vaccines besides the flu vaccine. And every now and again, you'll do something silly like step on a nail and then you'll go to the ED and get a tetanus booster. But we don't talk about the adult vaccine schedule. There's a whole schedule for adults. But to me, it was her cultural insensitivity because her medical training teaches her that, and she has my medical chart. She's been my doctor for 6 years. She has my chart. She knows she hasn't given me a pertussis vaccine in 6 years. It was her job to offer it. And then the real insult was not that she didn't do her job and follow good medical protocol, but instead of owning it, acknowledging it, or saying nothing, she felt emboldened to make a statement that to me was very racist and classist and just inappropriate. It was just inappropriate. And people have those experiences. Black and brown people have them disproportionately. People who don't, who English is their second language, people who are uninsured and underinsured. I mean, these are common, sort of experiences for people who unfortunately fall lower down the rung of that hierarchy of human value that we have in this society. And it gets played out these ways, but it has a profound impact on people's health.
Well,
if you aren't trusting of your provider, you're less likely to go.
Well,
I just stopped going to see her until I could find somebody.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I have a very dear friend. He's gay, and he was about to go on the road. He is in the arts, and he kept begging his doctor to provide him with PrEP, as a prophylactic against HIV. At least as something that would mitigate him contracting it, and the doctor dismissed him. For a couple of months, he got on the road. He got HIV. Unbelievable. I was like, in these kinds of, and he's African American, he's Black. And it's these kinds of things that are happening constantly. You're about to have a grandbaby, and you don't want to give your baby the whooping cough. You at least want to have the option. I have about 90 seconds. What's a remedy? Cultural sensitivity training. You said more doctors who are Black and brown and who are from poor areas. What's the remedy?
Yeah, so all of these things, and these aren't new solutions either. We've got a dearth of doctors. And then when you start to drill down on subspecialties, things related to mental health and behavioral health, those are very much underrepresented, and we just need more. If you want doctors to go and practice in rural communities, we've got a pipeline, kids into careers in medicine from rural communities, right? People are more likely to go back into communities that make sense to them or that they come from to practice. And so if we want more rural doctors, we need to pipeline rural kids to medical school. We want more Black doctors. We need programs to pipeline Black and brown children into careers in science and medicine, so we can deal with all of these pieces. And then we need to do a better job of quantifying these things that previously were sort of not on our radar around patient-physician communication, patient-physician interaction. You can actually quantify disparities. You can see that this doctor refers 50% of his white patients on for specialty care, but only 10% of his Black patients who meet the same criteria. Now the question is why? And the hospitals and hospital administrators and credentialing bodies can do that work. The data are there. We just haven't bothered to bring that lens of equity and remedying health disparities to the data to be able to answer these questions, but they're there.
We have to be intentional.
We got to do a better job on the front end and on the back.
We have to be intentional. Dr. Andrew Thomas from Chicago. He went to Howard Medical School and did his undergraduate work at the University of Chicago. He created something called Project 75. Under his program, more African Americans went to med school and got through med school and were certified as physicians than at any time in our history. Dr. Thomas died 40 years ago, but let us not ever forget that, and let us study Project 75, Dr. Deborah Verholden, because that program is the gold standard. Back in just a minute, talking about voting rights on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Deb?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Where's Dr. Knighton?
Well, she on the plane.
Oh, I didn't know she was flying today.
Yes. Where is she? On the plane. So I pitched
flew
that.
home last night.
I
flew home last night myself.
Bless your heart. I'm sorry. You know me. I woke up and sent you all, because I actually had gone to bed. I woke up and sent you all those stories. And I will call you because I got a little good news. And I will call you and let you know that after the show. Ooh.
Okay. Did it come in an envelope?
Hold on. What, babe? What'd you say?
I said, did you get this come in an envelope?
Just a little bit. It was the teeniest one, but it was a beginning. How about that?
Okay.
So I said, I thought of because I completely missed it, because I really spent the weekend, really building up my, because I said, wow, my resistance is low. And so I just kind of slow walked my way into doing things differently. Hello. I tried to do that this weekend. It's been hard because my brother.
I'm not on the next segment, right? Somebody else is on, right?
Yes. We're talking about voting rights. You want to listen to it?
I know. My uncle's in the hospital.
Oh.
I'm going to click back over, but I'm going to click over and talk to her. But I'll click back and stay on mute. So you can call me if you want, but I'm going to stay on and listen.
Okay. Bless your heart. Okay. My love to your uncle. Oh. Renee Criswell, call in. And you all call in, and everybody wish Paula a happy birthday. I did not know that it was Paula's birthday a couple of days ago. Had no idea. And I'm going to announce it, of course, at the beginning of the next segment. Everybody wish Paula a happy birthday. What? Go girl. Fabulous one. Hey, Mark. Happy birthday, girl. Happy birthday. Let me put that up here. How about that? Yes. Happy birthday, Paula. Everybody, please wish our beloved Paula a happy birthday. Thank you, Elena. That's so sweet. You all make me feel so good. Joyce, hey. They're sending everybody so much love today. Oh, they're giving her love today. Hey, A King down there in Memphis. And in Alabama, sending you much love. Everybody was down there. I wish I could have been there this weekend. Oh, everybody had such a marvelous time. I spoke with Congresswoman Terry Sewell. Oh, goodness. We've been friends for almost 40 years. So it was really, 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 really great speaking with her.
60 seconds, okay. And Attorney Gerald Griggs, his phone isn't even ringing when I try calling him right now.
Oh, please do.
Well, I'm calling him, but it's like, how it normally gets like that ringing sound. I'm not even getting that right now with him is the problem.
You're not, would you try, let me send you CK's number. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
CK Hoffler.
Okay, yeah, for some reason his phone won't even like ring, but I tried calling myself and it went through fine, so I don't know if it's his phone or us or what.
Okay, let me see where he is. You want me to have him call in?
Yes, if that works easier, because for some reason when I tried dialing him out, it's not going through.
Okay.
Thank you. 10 seconds.
Yeah, but let her know what we're talking about and try and bring her up.
Okay, I will do. Thank you.
Can.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Again, we can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Everybody, call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. You know what? Let's play that clip, Devin, that I wanted to play at the top. Go ahead.
Relatively civilized.
They look like any European family.
Christians, they're white.
This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
When they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they?
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
I want you to think on that. We're going to be talking about that as the show progresses. The media coverage of Ukraine. Those are corporate media spokespersons from CBS, MSNBC, the BBC, and who are talking about Ukraine. This is not supposed to happen here. This is a European civilized place. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. It's unbelievable. So what do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. In the meantime, let's talk about our voting rights. We just commemorated the 57th anniversary of the Voting Rights March, Selma to Montgomery. Of course, it started with Bloody Sunday, of course, famously led by Hosea Williams and then student John Lewis, which was preceded by the killing of Jimmy Lee Jackson, a veteran, an African-American veteran, a black man who had come back from the Second World War, as so many people did, like my grandfathers, like many of your grandfathers or great-grandfathers. And they were fighting for their rights. There was a reluctance by black people to go into the Second World War because we were being lynched and being mistreated and being denied our right to vote. And so there was a real pushback in the black community against going to the Second World War. So when that was settled and we came back and we were facing the same things, people said, absolutely not. No, 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 no. The world I left is not the world I came back to. I fought for democracy over in Europe. I am not going to be denied a democracy on the shores that I tilled, on the country that I built. So there was that. And Jimmy Lee Jackson came out of that particular struggle. And he was killed as he was organizing. He was actually with his family, but he had been at a voting rights rally at a church. And he was beaten to death. He was killed. Shot and killed. Unbelievable. And then Reverend James Reeb, inspired by that story, a white Unitarian minister out of Boston, married, father, went down in solidarity with his Christian brothers and sisters and with his human brothers and sisters. It did not matter to him that they were Christian. They beat him, killed him outside of a cafe after a voting rights march. Viola Liuzzo, a white, married mother of 5 out of Detroit. Her husband was a union leader. She was so moved by what she saw, she went down to Alabama. And as she was taking people to the airport after the march was over, she was murdered, point blank, killed on the highway, heading away from, just as she was trying to get people to the airport. A lot of people lost their lives. And behind that, you had President Johnson, who said, particularly after the killing of this white mother and wife, he gave a magnificent speech about voting rights, and that pushed us into the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so the pilgrimage is made every year to go to Selma, to remember, to never forget. My father has been going every year since 1965. He was on the Selma to Montgomery March. And along with so many others, so many. And so they were there yesterday, and we're mindful of the fact that, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, that what's happening right now is that our voting rights are under attack, as really in a way that we have not seen since, over the past 50 years. More than 40 states, New Hampshire, states that are majority white, CK, are rolling back access to the vote. And I don't even know if it's past 50, 60 years. I would even have to say almost since the founding of the Republic, because the original idea was not to have anybody but propertied white men vote. Many people are very excited about having made that pilgrimage yesterday, but we still need, into your way of thinking, an executive order on voting rights. What would that do? And why do we need it now?
Good morning, Santita. Well, my heart is heavy when I hear sort of the great recap that you did. I wish we didn't have to do that kind of a recap. But what would it mean? As you said, voting rights, we have peeled back. We have gone so far back in terms of progress that was made on voting rights now, until it really is shameful. It makes that march, Bloody Sunday, all that we learned as children, all that we have experienced as people, Black and brown, progressive people throughout the country and throughout the world, it makes it so difficult to breathe today because of where we are with voting rights. We saw after the presidential elections, the last presidential elections where President Biden won, that in a systematic, very methodical way, many states have passed voter suppression laws. And, you know, we have, as children, we have the memories, the thoughts, the pictures, the television footage of people being beaten, being killed, and being lynched because they stood up and they wanted to vote. That's imprinted in my mind, and certainly in the mind of many, many young children. And so today, while people are not openly being beaten and lynched because they're exercising their right to vote, they are being effectively prevented from voting freely and fairly. I feel like I'm talking to I'm in other countries where we are implementing for the first time, quote unquote, free and fair elections. So why is it important? It's important for there to be a comprehensive voting rights bill passed that has to go through the U.S. Senate, which we know is being blocked by conservatives, because people don't have the ability, because of these voter suppression laws, to vote freely. Their votes are being annihilated, are being uncounted. We saw what happened in Texas. But the president of the United States has the ability to continue to implement the presidential executive orders that would fill the gap until such time as there is a Voting Rights Act, an amended, a new, and improved Voting Rights Act that will change the awful trajectory that's happened since the Shelby County versus Holder case in 2013. So, Santita, we are in a crisis. Literally every step that's taken, every step that your father marched, every step that Dr. King marched, every step that Congressman John Lewis marched, and so many others on Bloody Sunday, the steps, I can just see them. It's almost like reversal. And we can't let that happen. So that's why we're at a critical stage. We're at a critical stage today. And Santita, we don't have a choice other than to keep on fighting for something that, quite frankly, we felt that we had won that battle over 50 years ago. And yet we're here today, in my impression, in a context of where we were in worse shape because it's happening before our very own eyes.
Well, you know, I want to ask you about voting drop boxes, for example, where you were able to fill out your ballot and drop them. More and more states are being targeted to eliminate them, not just limit them, but eliminate them. What will be the impact of eliminating voter drop boxes and narrowing souls to the polls on Sundays? You know, because more and more African Americans, and that's really something that you saw Reverend started to push for in the 70s and the 80s. You know, you'd go from church right to vote. That's being pulled back. But these drop boxes, you know, where you could just fill out your ballot, drop it, and go on about your business. Increasingly, they're being eliminated, CK. What is that going to look like?
Well, what it's going to look like is going to make voting very difficult. I voted the second time in a recent election via drop box. And I say recent election. In the Senate runoff election race in Georgia, I voted via drop box. The first time that I had done it, the lines were very, very long lines in Georgia. But the drop box made it so much easier, so much more convenient, because we were operating at the high game that's being played now in Santita, and it's voter suppression. So you eliminate that. That's classic voter suppression. That's one of the tactics of voter suppression that has been mastered over the years, but certainly now by conservative entities.
Well, CK, no one's talking about, see what happened in North Carolina when you had the Republican who went door to door collecting people's ballots. And remember, and he destroyed them. And then you have black people who are told when they go to the polls, if they have a record or if they've just gotten out of prison, they will ask the judge at the polling place. They might explain themselves. Well, they have always explained themselves, and they've said, am I eligible? And they will be told yes, and they face jail time.
Well, yeah, Santita, you're absolutely right. There is actually a case of African-American woman who was sentenced to 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, for doing just that, for asking for clarification. What should she do? Because she was unclear as to her ability to vote. And she went ahead and she voted via provisional ballot and determined that she...
Wait a minute. After the judge, now, what is the judge supposed to do? The judge told her she could do that. What's the role of the judges at the polling places?
Well,
I think that's important to know.
At the polling places, you have poll watchers and you have people who are there. In some communities, they act as judges. So you ask them, may I do this? May I do that? This is my situation. And they escalate it up. And in some jurisdictions, you have just election officials who serve as judges who make a determination. She inquired, and I apologize, I jumped a few steps. She inquired as to what she should do. And she followed to a T exactly what she was told to do because she did not want to be in a position of being accused of voter fraud or any impropriety. All she wanted to do was vote, and she wanted to do it the right way. So she followed the instructions, and as a result, she was brought up on charges of voter fraud and other things, which were federal charges. And so she does face, and she may already be serving a sentence of 5 years now. Maybe part of it has been commuted. But if you juxtapose that to someone in North Carolina who actually did commit voter fraud and got a slap on the wrist. So every state is facing these types of challenges. And what happens to some people, usually black and brown people, who in many instances are trying to clarify what is and what isn't, are led and told what they can do and are penalized for seeking clarification on how and if they can vote. So it's Santita, this is a really difficult time for us in our history. So when we talk about where we are in terms of voting rights, we're in a bad place. We're in a very bad place. And unless the president, now we know that and we do have to place, responsibility where it is. When the Senate refuses to entertain and to engage in the discussion of voting rights legislation, or when they take a poll and they will not pass it, we know which senators won't support any voting rights legislation. We know because this is already part of the history of the United States because they voted on it. So when this happens, that means that the states who are ultimately in charge of administering the voting procedures, the states are the ones that are in charge. But if there's federal legislation, they have to follow the law. Because of the Shelby County versus Holder case, that really got rid of pre-clearances and other protections that minority voters had precisely against voter suppression and other measures, other inconsistent applications of voting rules, voting laws in states, and procedures that are put in place really to initially to impede the ability of minority voters to vote. Because of that, we have all of these arbitrary laws that are being passed by states, and we have this level of voter suppression. So we're seeing it's going to happen all over the place. The midterm elections are going to be proof positive. We're going to see up close and personal the results of voter suppression. If we're not careful, and if we don't continue to take extraordinary efforts to educate the voters. But why do we have to continue to educate voters about voter suppression? We should just be able to vote. So that's what's at stake. And we know that historically, Santita, midterm elections result in a very, very poor turnout. So And this is the time when the president and the Democratic Party are hoping and counting on people coming out at the polls during the midterm elections. But because of the apathy, I believe, that exists, and because of just historically what the apathy that exists in terms of midterm elections, but especially now, some people feeling that maybe the Biden administration hasn't gone far enough to protect them, to deliver on some of the campaign promises as it relates to voting rights, as it relates to civil rights, as it relates to other things that they feel that the Biden administration promised and didn't deliver. And the apathy amongst young people, they feel that they stood up, they voted, and now they voted during a pandemic, very difficult times, and now their voting ability is being challenged even further. It makes you feel as though, why are you fighting for young people? Now, for those of us who do have imprinted, as I said, Santita, in our minds, the pictures of people being beaten, being attacked by dogs, being lynched because they were trying to exercise their right to vote, being beaten heinously to death, because that's imprinted on some of our minds, we are out there saying we're still going to vote. But there are many people who don't have that institutional history. They don't remember that. They've just seen it in a documentary. It doesn't really resonate with them. They don't know what it is to have family members who were beaten, who were killed for just speaking up because of their want and desire to vote, or to not live in segregation anymore, because even when the laws changed. So I think we're at a very, very dangerous, perilous times right now in terms of voting rights. But, I again am so encouraged personally by the efforts of your father and others who, no matter what, as Reverend Jackson's always said, we've been this place before and worse. And we have to keep on fighting, because we've never lost a fight that we haven't fought. But if you don't fight, you surely will lose. So I think, Santita, that's where we are. We're in a perilous time, very, very perilous time. And I think we have to educate our voters and speak to young folks. Tell them what is the path. Because a lot of times if you pursue a path and you think you're getting the kind of result based on a path and you don't, then it makes you feel like it's not worth pursuing at all. And that level of apathy would be devastating to voting rights. And that's what I fear the most.
Well, I think while I don't want to see this happen, I think that people are going to have to get turned away from the polls. They're going to have to see their votes not count before they get it. I mean, I don't think that people even understand, and I'm hoping that all people will see that they have skin in the game. I mean, if you're passing voter suppression laws in New Hampshire, wait a minute, this is not for blacks only. Eventually, it is spreading everybody. I mean, the power structure wants fewer and fewer people to have less and less access to the vote. And I think that we should all be concerned about it. It's something that we should all be fighting for. We should be asking for an executive order signed by this president right now. It would only last through his presidency, but it would be enough. It would be enough. It would be enough to get us to the next election cycle. What would an executive order for voting rights do, C.K. Hoffler?
Well, what it would do is, first of all, it would be a big sign to those who are struggling with this issue of voter suppression that the president is doing everything in his power to address the disparity and to address voter suppression, more than just talking about it in a speech, more than just telling a Senate that's already rejected it, they must pass it. But he is doing everything in his executive power, within his executive power that he has, to address that problem. And what would it do? It would make voters feel like there's a level of protection, because there are federal protections. Even though the states are the ones that administer the elections, there are a lot of federal measures that can be put in place to put the state in check, to help the state out in administering the election. So that's why it is very important for it to happen. It would send a signal to the states who are actively engaged in voter suppression. We have eyes on you, and there's going to be recourse for people if you continue with this voter suppression. That's very, very big, because the president is the chief executive of this country. He is the commander in chief. So he does have the ability to do that. He has a whole voting rights team that is advising him. He has a Justice Department. He can empower the Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department, to take steps, to take measures against voter suppression. There are short-term, midterm, and long-term things that this president can do that it is my hope and prayer he will do. He's begun the process, but it's not enough. It's not enough. I understand that there are measures on his desk, on his table that he can execute, that he can sign, and hopefully he will do that.
Because he has executed some executive orders already. He's done a lot of that. First of all, to get the budget passed. Mama D, I've got a little under a minute, but I wanted everyone to hear you. Mama D, what's on your mind today?
Well, hallelujah, greetings for you. I'm very concerned about John Lewis' right to vote Advancement Act because of the categories that they have added. Membership in a language minority group that is limited to Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans. And they do not include Blacks. And I don't remember any of those groups being beaten up on the bridge trying to vote. And yet they said Congress has determined that these three groups were the most impacted by voting. Please help me with that.
Okay, your question exactly is what?
My question is, how could Congress determine that Latinos, Asians, and American Indians are the most disadvantaged when it comes to voting? And that is what that John Lewis Right to Vote Advancement Act says in that membership of a language minority group.
Well, I tell you this, every time Black people have advanced, the whole country has advanced. And I think that they've just gotten very specific with that. I've got about 30 seconds, CK. Why don't you speak to Mama D's concerns? Because Black people have been lynched. I mean, we have been treated horribly. But, the fact is, by every metric, Mama D, the indigenous community are doing worse than Black people in the United States. That's a fact.
Absolutely. And so just very quickly, the indigenous people are doing 100 times, 1,000 times worse. There are certain communities for indigenous populations where they've never had a polling station. They've never had people vote at all. There's never been a single group of people in certain communities to vote because there are no polling stations, because the mechanisms aren't there. So what we have to do, whether you're Black or brown, progressive, we have to continue to fight for more openness and press upon the president to sign those executive orders right now. And Mama D, thank you so much for raising these concerns, but that's what we have to do.
That's right. And the Cherokee Nation needs Kim Tee in Congress. She's supposed to be a sitting member of Congress right now. She has not been given her seat. Can you imagine? You don't have to. Let's talk about racism in the coverage of the conflict in Ukraine. You got to hear. You got to hear what these corporate media reporters have been saying. Back in just a minute. CK?
Yes, Santita. I don't have time today.
I know. I was trying to give you a morning off. I tried.
I am. And look, I appreciate it. And when I don't have one thing, I do something else. I always, for you, there's always a priority. But I had something at 8:30. No, because I'm going to have a good friend. Oh my gosh, she from Buffalo, one of my very, very close friends who I met through Ethel actually. She her brother is transitioning right now.
Oh.
And so, and she really is the only person to address this. He's young. He's dying of cancer, a rare form of cancer that is metastasized. And so these are things. So I'm going to go help her out. I have to travel tonight.
Okay.
And as a result, I had to just push forward and book a lot of things just to be able to cover some of the things I had to cover today. So, thank you for including me. And
after your time with Ethel last week, I said, I got to give her a little bit of space. I was trying to give her a little bit of space.
Well, that's very kind of you. But if ever you need me to
to fill in ever on anything, I can, and this is something that I work in the space, so I can always come up to speed and make sure I didn't miss anything in the morning that transpired. Like, sometimes things happen overnight. You wake up in the morning, you're like, what happened?
Well, don't be fooled. If I catch it, I'm gonna roll you up into it, and then you can react to it. How about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for thinking of me, and I wish I had more time. But yes,
Sending Richard Prince and Bryce Green through.
in Ukraine. Oh my goodness.
Oh, girl.
I'm just saying, what in the world are we experiencing here right now?
Well, when this
craziness.
when this Ukrainian minister said, these are blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. This isn't supposed to be happening to them. He said, that's what's so distressing to me. I said, are you being serious right now? And there's a lot. And, because, now we have veterans who are going over there to serve, to fight. And and I hear them. But you do have a Nazi faction there. I mean, and so I'm wondering, if people of color go over there, how will they be impacted by that? Because that's very real. I mean, they've tried to deny it, but it's like, look, I ain't mad at you. Just tell me what the issue is, so I know how to deal with it. So,
well, I think it's going to be very ugly. I think it's going to be very ugly, and it's going to be very ugly for many because of the racial. And let's just do. I know that you're going to address the fact that we are opening our borders again as we close them to the Haitian refugees, 100 miles an hour going south. We are opening them to, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't open them to all refugees who are in crisis, but to Ukrainians who are in desperate need of finding refuge. I do understand that.
Absolutely.
But it's just interesting how in this country we have such a disparity in how we treat different groups of people. So it will be interesting, Santita, and I wish I could stay. I have to hop off now. But
I know. Sending you much love.
Likewise. And I'll be in Buffalo, New York tomorrow. So how about that? I'm sure in a pile of snow.
Oh, honey, you know this because we got a dusting this morning here in Chicago. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
God bless you. And thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Sending me blessings and, call me anytime.
Oh, hey, look, and travel safely. You'll hear from me later on. Okay. Hello. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Richard Prince?
Indeed. How are you? Good morning.
How were you, handsome, brilliant one?
Oh, I'm ready for a day. I'm ready for the day.
All right. And Bryce Green, how are you, Mr. The Green BJ?
I'm good. How are you doing?
You know what? This is Richard Prince of Journalism's. Indeed, I met him through our very, very dear friend, God rest his soul. Oh, I miss Brian so much. Oh my goodness. Yes. He is he was the editor of Ebony, and he was the one of the senior executives at CNN Politics. I mean, just really brilliant journalist who made his transition a little more than a year ago. It's hard to believe. I haven't even taken him out of my phone because I miss Brian and I love him so much. But I thank him for the gift of you as well. But he's a brilliant journalist. And Bryce Green, this is the gentleman whose article I sent to you yesterday. He's from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Richard Prince. This is Bryce Green. Bryce Green, Richard Prince, Bryce Green. And I encourage everyone to subscribe to Journal-Isms. Richard Prince's Journal-Isms. There's nothing more informative. I mean, it is great. If you want the best, it's not just, you just don't talk about diversity in corporate media and in media, generally speaking. You really help us you take me to different stories. And then he has these wonderful
60 seconds, everyone.
Zoom, I call them, Zoom get-togethers where he has some of the great thinkers who are sharing information. And, please give them your support and give Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting your support. I mean, they support us, so let us support them, please. Stand by, everybody.
Yes.
Ten seconds.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Santita Jackson Show. It's Monday, March 7th, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your voices today. Let's talk about the media coverage of Ukraine. We've heard a lot of, a lot of racial bias, let's put it that way. And we are going to hear some clips, and we want you to be the judge, and we want to talk about how that is shaping our perception of Ukraine, but of other conflicts all over the world. It seems that, to me, that when a conflict is in Europe, it becomes a world crisis, like when you have the G7 or the G8 meeting. You know, it's European leaders, so it's a group of world leaders. No, it's actually just European leaders. You know, you got to include the other 6 continents if it's going to be a world issue. And so we have to talk about that. I think that's very, very important for us to talk about when we look at how we perceive the suffering of Europeans as opposed to the suffering of Syrians, of Persians, of Arabs, of Africans, of Asians. I mean, think about that, everybody. Think about how we normalize violence and war in places where people of color live, but it's supposed to be unusual when it's in Europe. Not quite, not so fast. Let's think about that. Call us at 773-763. WCPT 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts about this. Got 2 brilliant experts who are going to help us to understand what we are seeing. In the meantime, it's Richard Prince of Journalism and Bryce Green of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Let's get a couple of these headlines out the way. In Chicago, we're already getting a dusting of snow. It's very foggy outside. A high of 37 degrees, snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 30 degrees will be the high. Above zero. That's right, partly cloudy. In the NBA, the Trailblazers will be meeting the Timberwolves tonight, and the Bulls will be meeting the 76ers. In the NHL over the weekend, as of yesterday, Chicago 3, the Lightning 6. Yes. I know, the Lightning. They were triumphant over our Chicago Blackhawks. And the Wild fell to the Stars. The Stars 6, the Wild 3. American Express is the latest credit card company to end its operations in Russia following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Visa and MasterCard made similar announcements over the weekend. A Russian military strike hit an evacuation route in a Kiev suburb yesterday, killing 8 people, including 2 children, as they tried to flee the invasion. The mayor said, "A family died in front of my eyes." The UN said yesterday that more than 360 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since Russia's invasion began, while acknowledging that the real figure is likely, as they put it, considerably higher. In the meantime, President Biden, who's been struggling with his polling number, well, guess what? He is enjoying a boost in his job approval ratings following the State of the Union and following this crisis in Ukraine. A majority of Americans, 52%, approve of how President Biden is handling the situation in Ukraine, according to the NPR PBS Marist poll of national adults. It's up from 34%. Almost 20% bounce, everybody, an 18% bounce. 44% disapprove, down from 50% last time. Only 4% are unsure. What do you make of that, everybody? Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. In the meantime, oil prices are soaring to their highest level in 13 years today, raising fears about a further spike in inflation. Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill are gearing up for a showdown over COVID-19 relief. Now, mind you, the spending bill includes $10 billion to help bolster Ukraine, but it also taxed on $22.5 billion to help bolster Americans. And that is something that Republicans widely oppose. What do you think about that? Americans need relief. Will they get it? Should they get it? Everybody, let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about what's happening in Ukraine. Let's talk about how it's being covered and how the corporate media's coverage of Ukraine is coloring how we view Ukraine and how we view what's happening in Yemen, how we view what's happened throughout the global South. I mean, one of the stories that is not being reported, and I was glad to see this on Democracy Now! Just a few days ago, a well-respected Filipino scholar, Walden Bello, talked about the global South and their suspicions of U.S. motives in Ukraine. So you have to understand, outside of the United States, a lot of people are having a lot of different conversations about what's happening there. But one of the conversations that's being stirred up here in the United States is just how this is being reported. The things that we are hearing, members of the corporate media, the people we have been listening to, the things that they have been saying. Devin, give me the first clip.
Relatively civilized.
They look like any European family.
Christians, they're white.
You know, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
When they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they?
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
What do you think about that? Of course, in the next clip we're going to hear at the bottom of the hour, you will hear Ukraine's deputy chief prosecutor who says, quote, "It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed." What do you think about that, everybody? Call us, text us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Now, mind you, we absolutely believe that the invasion of Ukraine is wrong. Absolutely. And something needs to be done about that. Do we need to harm President Putin? Absolutely not. I don't come from that tradition, and I'm never going to sign up for that. I think that's irresponsible for Senator Lindsey Graham and others to call for the assassination of a head of state. I would be profoundly disturbed if you did that to ours, and we shouldn't do that to anyone else's. And if you believe in democracy, regime change is not the answer. A new election is. Now, either you believe in democracy or you don't. That's all there is to it. Either you're an autocrat or a Democrat. You let me know where you stand. But I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. I've got a couple of brilliant voices who can help me to help you and I to understand what we have been hearing and what we are seeing here. Because I think it's important for us to, and you all are calling in and continue to call in, I think it's important for us to break all of this down. Of course, a friend of this show, indeed, a dear friend of mine who is also really a mentor to me and so many people. He is a brilliant veteran journalist, and he has a wonderful, it's a brilliant and informative, I would say, he really helps us to understand diversity in the media. Richard Prince's Journalisms. Richard Prince's Journal-isms. I encourage you to give him your support. I encourage you to subscribe. You're going to get some of the best information. You're going to get connected to some of the best stories, some of the finest analysis. Indeed, Brian Monroe, our dear friend who has made his transition, who was the head of Ebony and Jet, who became head of CNN Politics. He did so many things. He said, "This guy is brilliant. You need to get to know him." And I thank him for the gift of you, Richard Prince. And of course, we've got this brilliant young man from Indiana University, but he's a writer for Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And he has gotten all of you all fired up, and I just love it. Bryce Green, let's start with you, Mr. Journalisms, Richard Prince. Journalisms, I love it. Talk to me.
Well, thank you for those nice words.
Well, no, I thank you for all the work that you do, I mean, Brian was absolutely right. He said there's no one more brilliant, no one who has a greater overview of what we need to be doing in journalism, the representation that we need to have. But he said he also understands how journalism works, and he can just connect you to stories. What are we looking at when you hear these people who say this is not supposed to happen in Europe? Oh, but we've had some of the greatest atrocities known to humankind happen in Europe. Help me.
Yes. Well, I think that those people who use those terms like civilized versus uncivilized were, of course, mistaken. But everybody sees the world through his or her own lens, and to the people who were reporting on the situation from the white world and the white point of view, see the world exactly through those lenses, as you said, and they were clumsy in their language. But what they were saying is essentially true from their point of view. We had Malcolm Nance, who has been on your show, who is a counterintelligence expert, who was on MSNBC as a commentator, as a counterintelligence expert, terrorism expert. And he spent a month in Ukraine, and he spoke with us last week, which I wrote about, and he talked about how westernized Ukraine was. He said, we never expected, those who said that there would never be a war between two countries with McDonald's, was wrong. And he talked about how the reporters were staying in 5-star hotels, and how you couldn't tell. He felt as if he might be in Vienna or Paris or some of these other European places when he was in Ukraine. And so, therefore, what those people who were talking about their impressions of this European country, we're just saying the same thing that Malcolm was saying, except they used offensive terminology. So I don't want to give them a pass, but I just want people to understand, where that's coming from. There has not been a war like this in Europe since World War II, and you can't say that about too many other parts of the world that have had conflicts. So I want to say that, but I also want to talk about our priorities. To me, this is not the priority. The priority is as you said, all those people who are dying and being fired upon for the reason of one man's ego, basically, and megalomania. And I think that we need to focus on that. And as far as all of this is concerned, to me as a journalist, the biggest issue is what is the truth and who is telling it. And that's where I am focusing my attention. And these reports of making it a crime to even call it a war in Russia, and forcing out journalists, and places like the Washington Post having to remove bylines because they're afraid that those people will be retaliated against, and closing down the independent media and social media in Russia, so it's hermetically sealed from the outside world, and the Russian troops going into Ukraine not knowing why they were there because they'd be getting misinformation. That, to me, is a big threat that needs to be discussed. And the whole issue of this is an extension of the whole issue of misinformation and disinformation that has been going on around the world and also in the United States versus the big lie and all of that threatens our democracy. You mentioned democracy versus autocracy, and there's been a big concern that the United States is losing its own democracy because of all this.
Exactly. And so when I hear corporate media spokespersons say that this should not happen here, particularly when a lot of the mischief, let's be honest, that you see in the global South has been stirred up by Europe and by the United States to take their resources. So, I think it's something we've got to look at all of it because, when I'm sitting and when I'm talking to my godchildren and my nieces and nephews who are in college now, and when they see this, I have to explain this to them. They already have their own interpretations, but there's things that I feel that I need to reinforce. I want them to understand, no, that is racist, that is classist. I want you to understand it, and I want you to fight it. When Auntie is gone, because I don't want you to get caught out here. Um, really, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, and I think we have to deal with all of this, all of these things. Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, your thoughts?
Well, I agree that this is how a lot of these people see this conflict. A lot of these journalists are saying that, yeah, I didn't expect this to happen to a quote unquote civilized country. I didn't expect this to happen to a European, a westernized area. And to some extent that's true. That's the way they view the world. They're seeing it from their own point of view. But I think the most pernicious thing about that point of view is that there are wars and destruction being waged all around the world that we cause, but they don't care about it. And so these tears for these blonde-haired, blue-eyed children, I mean, they're completely justified. But it seems that they don't place a value on human life. They place a value on a certain kind of human life. I'll give you an example. I mean, just look at the sort of things that we do around the world. If you're ever curious about what we're doing in terms of wars, Brown University has an excellent series called the Cost of War Project. Mm-hmm. And recently they released figures showing how many refugees that U.S.-generated wars have generated. And it's astounding. It's like millions and millions and millions, something like 40 million, which is more refugees than any time since the end of the Second World War. But no one cares about them. I mean, even right now, we're bombing Yemen. And that's the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. Something like 300,000 people have died over the last several years in this conflict. But the fact that they're not white, the fact that they're not European, the fact that Westerners cannot see themselves in these people's shoes means that they do not get the attention that they need. And in effect, that legitimizes the products of U.S. empire, and it focuses attention on the crimes of others. There was a concept by Ed Herman and Noam Chomsky called worthy and unworthy victims. The worthy victims are the victims of official enemies, the ones that we should care about. And unworthy victims are the victims of us. And even when they're more numerous, even when we're doing far worse things, those unworthy victims don't get any attention. And that's just one of the ways that the United States manufactures consent for its policies abroad, by hiding the truth. And so, like, one of the weird things that's happening right now that I found kind of strange, I was reading about it yesterday, is that Saudi Arabia, they haven't ramped up oil production to help out their allies, the U.S. In fact, they've refused to. And there are a lot of tensions between the Saudis and Biden right now. But the Biden team, there was a report about the Biden team planning on a trip to go to Saudi Arabia to try and make amends. Well, what will that deal look like? If you look at the past year, Biden got a lot of hate from Saudi Arabia for talking about the Yemen war, for talking about the need for the United States to stop funding the war. Now, he's kept funding the war, but that criticism really put the U.S.-Saudi relationship on ice for a bit. And so if there is a way to get the Saudis to pump more oil, it would very likely involve refunding the Saudi war on Yemen, ramping up how many offensive weapons we sell them, increasing levels of military support. And so, in essence, you have Biden offering to ramp up a war that's far worse than anything Putin's ever done. The Yemen war, the UN recently reported that there are about 13 million people on the brink of starvation in that country, far worse than what's going on in Ukraine. So you have Biden trying to ramp up that war in order to fix the mess that was caused by another war that, while yes, this is Putin's war, Biden certainly helped push for it. And so you have lives being traded for lives. And that to me is just sickening. It's ridiculous. But this is how the empire operates. You have the worthy victims that you want the people to pay attention to, the people that you want people to shed tears for, and then you have the unworthy victims, the victims of your own empire, the people that you want to sweep under the rug and hope that the American public doesn't even know about.
I want to hear your thoughts, everybody. 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. Does it make a difference how stories are reported? I mean, when you're shaping national consensus. Richard Prince, I've got about a minute before I go to break. How does this kind of reporting help shape national consensus, or does it not do anything? Because we see that the president has gotten like an 18-point bounce in a week from his handling,
Yes.
Of this particular conflict.
Yes. I think we should keep our eyes on the conflict. I think Putin would like nothing more than for us to be talking about other parts of the world. We have to remember that Yemen is a tragedy, but Yemen does not have a nuclear bomb. Ukraine and Russia in that situation would all blown up.
Well, everybody, let's talk about it. I want to hear your thoughts. I hear you, Tommy and Noel and Renee and Don and so many of you. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. I want to hear your thoughts about how this conflict is being reported. And oh boy, and it's snowing outside. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful here in Chicago as we are praying for people in Ukraine who have been driven out of their homes, as we pray for the people of Yemen who've been driven out of theirs. And we can just keep on going on and on and on and on. My father often says that we do best what we study most. And we have been told that we need to study war no more. Will we do that? Is there a path to peace here? Should there be? Be very clear. There ought to be. Because you don't shoot your way out of war. You negotiate your way out of it, everybody. We've got to find a way to peace. No one else should die. No one. No one should even feel threatened with death. Not right, everybody. We've got to do right, not just better. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show with Richard Prince of Journalisms and Bryce Green of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And you, call me at 773-763-9278. Back in just a minute. Okay, handsome gentlemen.
I don't know if you saw this, but there was a peace deal that was recently rejected by Ukraine. I just read this like an hour or two ago. The peace deal was that Ukraine would recognize those two Donbas republics as Russian or as independent, and they'd recognize Crimea as Russian, and they would also agree not to join any alliance, and they would have to appoint a new prime minister. Ukraine rejected this, but I'm not sure if that was the wisest decision, considering I don't think that they're going to win this war, and any extension of this war won't really change the outcome. And the only thing that extending the war will do would be to make the terms
sending Shapiro through
and have more people die in the meantime. So this peace deal seems like the most reasonable thing. It's also the closest thing to the status quo that a lot of people are thinking that Putin was trying to annex the entirety of Ukraine, which I don't think he could handle even if he wanted to. But this peace deal seems like the best option. But instead, I think you have people calling for a no-fly zone, which to me is the most insane thing that people could do. You saw people marching down the street saying, "Close the skies." Well, what that means is shoot Russian planes. And what that means is World War III, and that's game over.
Well, I keep hearing all of these Ukrainian officials and people who they have speaking, who have, people who are speaking to the corporate media in the United States, Richard, and Bryce. And, typically the people who they're speaking to are people from the Atlantic Council on Foreign Relations. I get all of that. I'm not mad at you. But for you to call for a no-fly zone, which is an act of war, Come on, you guys. Well, we've got American veterans who are leaving the United States right now as we speak to go volunteer. Oh, oh my gosh. You guys, it's heartbreaking to me. It's heartbreaking. And Richard Prince, I think about I've said this so many times on this show, but it means so much more to me now, so many years later. The last time I saw my grandfather alive, of course, I spoke with him subsequent to that, but he died like 6 months after I saw him. He talked about his experience during the Second World War. He had never done that before. This was like my granddaddy, you just have fun with him. He was just big fun. And that's when you cut the watermelon when he came home, right?
Right.
He was just a really sweet, amiable guy, Charles Henry Jackson. And, but he talked about Auschwitz and Buchenwald. And he said, baby, we were sent in there, the black soldiers, because the survivors would have known that we were not Nazis. He said, but the real reason was because they had landmines all over these death camps. So many black soldiers lost their lives even after the war had been declared over. But I just remember him saying several times, because my father and my Uncle Saint were about to leave and go to the airport, and we were going to be down with our grandparents just a couple more days. He said, baby, war's an awful thing. He said, war's awful. He said, you never, ever want to go to war. He said, I lost so many friends. And I'll just, you know what? Richard Prince, I'll never forget that.
Yes, I can imagine.
He was out of here 6 months later at the age of 59. When I look back on that, he was he was not an old man, but he did look like one.
Right.
10 seconds, everyone.
So, he guides me today. God bless him.
Right.
And let's come in with that clip.
Memories.
Oh,
we can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing for all of the people.
hey, everybody. Before we get to our clip, Chaparral had a big event on Saturday night, a big healing event, and so many of you supported it. Of course, she has celebrations by us, but she wanted to come on this morning and thank you for all of the support that you gave the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation.
Yes, I did, Santita, and I want to personally thank you for all of your support, as well as also Dr. Marty Terrain, who pushed me to put this event together, and all of your Morning Star listeners, from D-Ray to Andre to Renee to Nina to Lorraine, to all of those, Maddie, everybody from the Morning Star have sent a contribution to the foundation, and I greatly appreciate all of the support. It was a night of blessing and healing, and I hope to continue to do this every year. We're working hard at the foundation to put your contributions to good use. We're getting ready to gear up for our college scholarship giveaway program, as well as also our back-to-school program that'll be happening in the summer. But we are still working at Celebrations by Us, Santita. This is prom season. It is kicking off. We will be posting some great promotions for your balloon arches, your sweet tables, and your hors d'oeuvre packages. So please give us a call at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. Thanks so much, Santita.
Of course, and congratulations on that wonderful, wonderful event that you had. Let's play that clip, Devin.
First or second?
Second, well, the one that we have not played already.
And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
As you're talking to us, Matthew, we're playing in the latest pictures of some of the refugees trying to get on trains or trying to get out of Ukraine. And what's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
Play the next one as well, because I want us to hear that one too.
Relatively civilized.
They look like any European family.
Christians, they're white.
This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
When they say, oh, civilized cities, and in another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world, they really mean white people, don't they?
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
He should also be historically accurate, because those places that he was speaking of, when you speak of Syria, when you speak of Iraq and Iran, these are the cradles of civilization along with Africa. This is where civilization was born. I mean, what are you talking about? Does not make a lot of sense. Before I go to the callers, Richard Prince, you respond to what you heard in the news, then you, Bryce, and then we'll get the callers involved.
Well, the people who made those remarks have apologized. Mm-hmm. I think that this is, as I said earlier, Putin would like nothing more than for us to be talking about this instead of what's happening now in the streets, the people dying, the photographs of the father with 3 children who were just killed. People, the suppression of the press and the hermetically sealed nature now of what's going on in Russia. I think that's what's really going on. These people who are fleeing, the people who are, like I said, are being bombed, and then Russia denies it, deserting civilians. I think that's what's more important than some slips of the tongue. I don't want to just brush it off as some slips of the tongue. But people who are making comments that were made days ago and for which they have since apologized.
Well, Richard, let me say this. The reason I brought this up is because my audience asked me to, because I don't have I don't have Putin's talking points and I don't have his interests. I have our interests at heart, not just black people, but all people. And I am from a tradition where we pull for peace. We push for peace, even at our peril, because indeed, when Dr. King was killed, he was the most unpopular man in America because he was pushing against the military-industrial complex and pushing for peace, and my parents were working for him for $75 a week, and I'm going to stay on that. My thing is, when I hear this kind of racist reporting, it's something that we've got to acknowledge too. I don't care what Vladimir Putin thinks. What I care about is what these young people, when they look at television, when they're looking for some answers, when they have people who are trusted and who make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year, who have this kind of worldview, I think that's very dangerous. And I think that we've got to call it out because we've got to fight. What did our grandparents do? They said it was double V, victory abroad and victory at home. They had to fight the Nazis. They had to. But they also had to come home and fight their former white slave masters. It was a both and. It was not I don't think we have the luxury of choice here. I just don't. Bryce, your thoughts?
I think we've called it out.
Yeah, I think you got to call it out, even as they apologize. I'm like, good for you. I'm glad you apologized. But your worldview is what still disturbs me.
Sorry. Exactly. And it's not about like giving marks to these individual people who might have said some bad things and apologize. What this is about the assumptions that undergird all of our reporting. The assumption here, it seems to be, is that Putin is doing something unprecedented to people. That we would never do something like this. We would never act in such a way that would cause so much death and destruction. And that's completely false. I mean, that's the opposite is true. I mean, even if you look at this war in Ukraine, the United States does things orders of magnitude worse all the time and has been for decades and decades and decades. So to me, the key point here is even if we're looking at these, even if we're having all of this this hatred towards Putin, this animosity, this how are you doing this? You say that Putin would like nothing more for us to focus on our own crimes. Well, that might be true, but if we want to have any moral authority to criticize Putin, then we have to look at our own crimes. We have to look at what we're doing in Afghanistan. We're starving that entire country after stealing all of their money. In Yemen, we're helping the Saudis bomb the hell out of them. And that's orders of magnitude worse than what Putin is doing over in Ukraine. Now, yes, this is the current situation, and we do have to address that. But if we let ourselves fall into the trap into thinking that this is only something that our enemies do, these victims only exist when our enemy does something wrong, then I think that we're setting ourselves up to be duped in the future, and we're setting ourselves up to the very real crimes, things that we can actually affect.
Who is saying that? Who is saying that this is something that only the Russians do?
A lot of people. People are saying that the U.S. doesn't push for wars. The U.S. actually defends. NATO is a defensive alliance. That's what we're here for. When if you look at the last 10 years, the last 20 years, that's far from true. This is nonsense. Libya alone should show you how much NATO cares about peace.
Well, you know what? Richard, you want to respond to that before I go to the callers?
Well, all I can say is let's talk about what's happening now to the people who are being shot in cold blood and have nothing to do with Yemen. This is the situation. This is what's before us right this minute. We could talk about history and what's gone on before, at another time. We have a crisis before us at this very moment. And
yes,
the issues, as I said in the beginning, is disinformation, deflection, talking about something else instead of what's on the table right now.
I don't think so. Yemen is ongoing.
That's not disinformation.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, right. Yemen is absolutely ongoing right now. There are bombs falling as we speak.
Bomb. Yemen does.
Neither does Ukraine.
Bomb. What's that?
Neither does Ukraine.
But Russia does.
But Yemen is the country that's being under attack. Ukraine is the country that's being under attack.
Sorry? Ukraine just had the nuclear reactor attack.
Yes, but that's not a nuclear bomb.
It can spread radiation. And we were very lucky, as the commentators said, that was not triggered by this attack from Russia.
That's true.
Keep your eyes getting away from the critical issues here.
Keep your eyes on the prize.
Okay, well, hold on.
My prize, in my view, is to keep as many civilians from dying as possible. And if we want to see how to do that, we need to focus on the areas that we can most directly affect. Right now, the areas that we can affect are Yemen.
Well, let me go to Tommy from Chicago. Tommy, what's on your mind?
First of all, let me say good morning to you, Santita, and especially to all of your guests. And I hope that everybody is listening to me and hear me very clearly. We talk about civilization. How civilized was it when they pulled up with the slave ships in front of Africa? How civilized have we been in talking about democracy? And here in the United States of America, we know what happened in January 6th and the stuff that has gone on in this country before, and we have never stopped and pumped the brakes and found out what is the truth about the big lie. And for the record, I think one of your guests said it absolutely eloquent. Every world war has been fought in Europe. And you cannot tell me anything about somebody being civilized because of the acronyms they want to use and all the rest of it, where all those people were exterminated, and they weren't black people. And so now we're at this point of asking ourselves, how civilized is it for Russia to go into Ukraine and bomb with the people up in the atomic plant, begging them to stop before you start a reaction that can cause the end of the world? Where we're at right now ought to be a somber look of asking ourselves, how is it that we're listening to these people tell us that the Ukrainian people are fighting so valiantly, and we have supposedly allotted all of this money, and they're making Molotov cocktails? What happened to the money, people? At some point, we need to stop and ask ourselves one simple question. Are we civilized individuals, or do we just simply like war? Because that's where we're at right now. Russia is now sitting up saying that they're not going to allow the continual supplying of military aid coming through Poland and the other supposedly NATO-protected countries. We're in a crisis here. And this crisis is, when will there be a harvest for the world? None of this stuff is right. But as long as I got the big stick and you got the little one, I'm going to do what it is I want to do and skip you. I love all you guys. Have a great day.
Well, we love you. Let's go to Renee from Chicago. Renee, what's on your mind?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to say that we have crises going on all over the world, especially in black and brown places in this world. And a lot of the conflicts that we have, the United States has their hand in those conflicts. Presently and historically, we've played a role. We have people in Haiti in crisis from natural disasters and from gangs in the street. And some of the people there are saying that it's our very own CIA who's arming the so-called gangs who are terrorizing them. We have people in Libya, thanks to our great country, who are enslaving Africans. We have crippling sanctions in places like Syria. We're giving bombs to the people to bomb people in Yemen. In Palestine, we have Palestinians who are being murdered daily, and our country supports the government that is murdering these people. Our hands are not clean. And, the people, they said, Ukraine, those are civilized people. Well, civilized people have historically had conflicts. They colonized Africa. They're still, a lot of those countries are still suffering from that and from the current policies that they have. So we need to heal the world, like Tommy said, but all of the world. And we need to hold accountable the people who do things like farm neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. People who keep black, African students from boarding a train. We need to be looking at all of this and not just blinded by the propaganda that we hear and see on corporate media. And that's how we heal the world. And we need to heal the United States because we have people who get killed right here. And a police officer in Louisville, Kentucky was just found not guilty for wanton endangerment, however you say it, when he should have been held accountable for the bullets that killed Breonna Taylor. No charges were even filed until Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. This world will just not be the type of place that we deserve and that we need. So that's. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. But,
no, I don't think you're rambling. You're not rambling. This is your platform. You're not rambling. This is your platform. I want you all to be heard. And when you Bryce Green, and when you when all of us, Richard Prince, when you talk to other reporters, I want you to share what this audience are saying, because people have a lot of different thoughts, and a lot of what I do is guided by what you all ask me to cover. When we saw the Africans who were not being allowed to leave Ukraine, or at least they were made far lesser priorities. Many of you reached out to me. You said, hey, we need to talk about this. And so, I said, because I want to get the right people. I'm always very, very keen on getting the right people to have these kinds of conversations. And I felt that this conversation, which this falls under this umbrella, how stories are reported. And because I think that, one of the things, Richard Prince, when I was growing up in Operation Breadbasket and then Operation Push and then Rainbow Push, they did something called media education. And you would learn how to study the media, because they would be at our marches and they'd say there were 100 people there, and we knew there were 1,000 people there. The police know how to count, how many people could fill up a block. And you would see things like that. So I've just become very, very accustomed to, to studying the media as well. Let me go to Noel from the South Side. Noel, what's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Great.
Yes, I take issue with your guest, Richard.
Mr. Prince?
He said that, he said the reporters have apologized. He missed that point. That's not an issue. The apology is not an issue. The issue is the attitude that they have, because they are just saying something out loud. They are just saying it out loud that only white lives matter. They are the civilized world. So when they get attacked, their lives matter. But if you are in Africa or you are in the Middle East, your life does not matter. Richard said, let's focus on what's going on right now. Yes, we should focus on what's going on right now. The war is ongoing in Ukraine, and it's also ongoing in Yemen and in Libya and in most other third world countries as well, initiated by NATO, which is supposed to be a defensive alliance. Over the last 20 years or 30 plus years, Western European countries have caused the most headache around the world. They are the greatest threat to world peace. They've always been the greatest threat to world peace. Conflicts have raged other places, but they are localized, and they are usually solved by the local people. So the apology is great, but it's the attitude behind that apology. That's what the problem is.
Well, Richard,
I agree with that.
Richard Prince, would you like to respond
Yes,
to Noel?
I do agree with the fact that the attitude behind the words is important and should be part of the discussion. But let me also just remind folks that the people in Russia who are protesting are now subject to 15 years in prison. We don't have that here, and we should be thankful for the freedom of speech that we do have. You couldn't say what you just said.
We do have that. We do have that. If you look at all the anti-protest laws that are being passed in the wake of the Black Lives Matter, we have laws like that on the books in many states.
10 years in prison?
10 years, 5 years in prison.
Well, I think that if we really just, and I will say this, just given what I've seen and what I've heard about in my lifetime, and given my own background, dissenters really are not treated well in real time, in the United States. Dr. King was an enemy of the state, and there was an atmosphere that was fomented that the New York Times lied on him. A lot of these mainstream media organs lied on him, and they helped to set the climate in which he was assassinated. So there's that. Dissenters are treated rather poorly, and we do have more and more laws in which whistleblowers are punished without. I mean, just they are pummeled into the ground because they want to tell the truth about something that they've seen. So I think that, there's a lot that we can still work on the books. Do we have freedom of speech? Yes. Do we punish people for speaking freely? We do that too. And I think it's a both and. It doesn't make America any less great, but it does give us the mandate to push for America to be what it really is supposed to be. I hope, that's just where I stand on this, because I grew up with a dissenter, and I know, the price that you pay for it. And that's okay. Because the people who really do that, they're willing to do that. Um, but we are slowly watching many of these precious rights that we have, they're being eroded. And I think that, we need to sound the clarion call so that they are bolstered and not burned away. Let me get some closing thoughts from you, Richard Prince, and then from you, Bryce Green. I've got 1 minute for you, 1.5 minutes for you, Richard Prince. Everybody, journal-isms, please, 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 please become a subscriber.
Thank you. Well, I agree with what you just said about the need for us to be vigilant and to improve what's in writing about freedom of speech. I do subscribe to that. What I would like the audience to do, and I think a lot of them are doing that, is to seek out the truth. Beware of misinformation, disinformation, deflection, changing the subject. We have something right before us. We need to deal with that. We can also we can do two things at the same time. But let's not minimize what's going on over there right now. That's it. And beware of false equivalence is my other part. Thank you so much. And I was so glad to hear from the listeners.
Oh, well, they're out here. This is Talk Radio. Bryce Green, your closing thought. I'm sorry, Bryce, I only have a minute.
Right. I think the root of this issue is, you're right. We have to focus on this issue. We have to focus how we contribute to it. And one of the ways that we contribute to it is by creating a state of international lawlessness. Like, we criticize Putin for, violating international law, violating the sovereignty of other countries. But if we want to stop that, the best way to do that is to stop participating in it, to stop perpetrating it. In fact, Putin is using the same justification we used in Yugoslavia in the 90s to go into Yugoslavia, the responsibility to protect. We shouldn't take it seriously when he says it. We shouldn't take it seriously when we say it. But if we want to change things, the first place to look is here, at home. And one of the main things that we should focus on, especially in Ukraine, is how we contributed to this crisis. We pushed NATO up against Russia's borders. We tried to wrest Ukraine from the Russian sphere of influence, even though our own people warned us that Russia would have some sort of reaction, even though Russia warned us for decades that there would be some sort of bad reaction. And the fact that we ignored that, I think, is the critical part. And the fact that that's not talked about just goes to further what I've been saying, which is that we do things like this all the time. And if we care about the victims in Ukraine, then we should also care about our own victims. And even more so, considering that we can actually do something to alleviate that suffering.
All I'm saying is give peace a chance, everybody. Study war no more. Indeed, I've been told by a wise man, my dad has often said, we do best what we study most. We study war a lot. We need to study peace. We really, really need to understand that love is a weapon, and that love is a strengthening agent. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. Let's think about that, everybody. And let's figure out a way and work toward, in a meaningful way, moving toward peace today in Ukraine and all over the world. I'm Santita Jackson, Richard Prince. Journal-isms, everybody join it. Fairness and accuracy in reporting. Please give them your support. We need them. We need all the work that they do. God bless you, everybody.
Have a great day.
Oh, thank you, Richard Prince. Thank you. No, I stumble over calling you Richard all the time. I want to call you Mr.
Richard,
Prince.
I'm sorry if I got a little testy there. It's something you said about making false equivalency, like that's sort of triggering for me in a way, because we cannot make the equivalence between Russia and the U.S. The U.S. is far, far worse, and we have the ability to change things here. And so that it seems to me to be the biggest, most important thing to focus on.
Okay.
Well, you know what?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I come from a tradition that pushes America to become, as Dr. King said, as what it is on paper. And I'm going to continue to do that.
The New York Times undermined him, but I didn't understand what the reference was.
Oh, there were so many. They would print a lot of false stories on him. They even did that to Reverend in 1992. And we were getting ready to go over to the Madison Square Garden, where he was going to give a speech at the Democratic Convention in the summer of 92. So, well, the Democrats gave him the wrong time, so we had to run like crazy out of our hotel, literally, so he could literally run on the stage and give his speech. That's a whole different set of stories. But then as he was coming off the stage, Senator Bill Bradley, the then senator from New Jersey, walked up to my father and he apologized. And he gave him a hug and he apologized. He said, "Reverend, I'm so sorry." And he said, "What had happened?" We said, "Well, sorry about what, Bill? What happened?" Well, it turns out the New York Times had actually written about Reverend's speech before he had given it. And they had said that his speech was poorly received. And it was one of the most poorly received speeches in his public life.
Wait a minute. You mean they said that before he even gave the speech?
Do you understand what I'm saying? I said when he walked off the stage.
Oh, I see.
Bill,
wow.
Yeah,
wow.
When he walked off the stage, the story had already been written. It was in the Times. And I have grown up with that. And I watch how these establishment organs behave. And I challenge them not to do better, but to do right. Do right. Do right.
Right.
We've been lied on. Have we sued? No. But there's a lot of that. Dr. King was harassed by the corporate media. Absolutely he was. He was lied on by the corporate media, by our government. Absolutely. We don't need to act like that did not happen just because he has a statue on the mall. He was treated horribly in real time by our government, by people he could not get in. He was thinking of leaving the movement. He said, "I've become an impediment." And you explain to me how he could be killed 1 year to the day, to the minute that he walked to the rostrum church, his declaration against the war in Vietnam. They killed him just about a minute after 6. That's when he started speaking at Riverside in 1967. April 4th, 1967. April 4th, 1968.
Yes.
So acting like these things have not happened, do not happen. No, they do happen. They happen all the time. And dissenters are treated horribly. I know how Reverend was treated horribly when he ran for president and how he was treated as he was about to run and coming out of it. I get it. Am I bitter about it? No. But do we need to at least say, hey, these things happen? Yes. Do we need to look at beyond him, beyond them, how we treat whistleblowers who are they're not trying to. Being a whistleblower is very uncomfortable. You could lose your job. You might even lose your life. There's a whole lot of things that can happen, but people go on and they do it anyway. And yet we have enacted more and more laws to make life harder for them and to make it less possible for them to reveal malfeasance that they find in government. That's shameful.
I thought they passed the whistleblower protection law.
They're passing more and more laws inside. They have all kinds of restrictions against whistleblowers. That's
Remember, Obama persecuted the most whistleblowers of any president in the history of presidents.
Yeah, this is what we do, and I think we have to be honest.
If you have those stories about the media and Dr. King, I'd love to see them. About the harassment of him, that would be something I'd be interested to.
Why don't you talk to Andrew Young about it?
Okay.
Yeah, you should. The 1 or 2 people who are still living, who lived through it, absolutely. This is what they lived through. This is why my mother has a particular worldview at 77. I'm not going to wait on the New York Times to report on themselves. I will ask my mother. I will ask Reverend Jackson. I will ask Andrew Young. I will ask Zernona Clayton. I will ask the 1 or 2 people who are still left.
Okay.
Who tell me, wow, I can tell you stories. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you find that there are people embedded in these corporate media organizations who are part of the intelligence community, that's real today.
Mm-hmm.
Mockingbird.
I mean, who else? Who did J. Edgar Hoover give the stories to? He didn't give them the Jet and Ebony. He gave them to the New York Times, the LA Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Daily News. Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When he wanted to spread a lie, a viral lie about Dr. King and others.
Mm-hmm.
They used those establishment organs. Look, the media is the only protected profession in our founding documents.
Yes.
So I mean, this is the way it is. I get it, but I will still challenge them to do what they're supposed to do, not what they're going to do. That's all that I'm saying. That's all that I'm saying. This is something I've lived through, and like I said, I am not going to wait on all these establishment organs to come and tell me, well, this is what I did. No, no, that's not what you do. I know that's not what you do. I will talk to the people who read the falsehoods, who had to live with it, who had to live with them. Oh, I'll talk to them because I grew up with them. And I have been in marches where I have seen.
The best way to get in touch with Andrew Young?
I will find out because I'm going to see him at his birthday party this weekend, this upcoming weekend.
Oh, his birthday is this week?
Well, I don't know if it's this weekend, but I know they're going to have a big, it's about thereabouts. They're going to have a big party from down in Atlanta.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
But you know, I mean.
Okay, well, listen, go ahead.
No, I'm saying my mother's still around. There are people who experienced this. And they have more days behind them than they have ahead. Mm-hmm. They experienced it. Ask them.
Oh, I understand. I think this has been documented in in a number of books and all. Yeah. But I just wanted to to hear Andrew Young's accounts.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I mean, whoever you can speak to, because it was a small group. People ask my father constantly, oh my goodness, what was it like for Dr. King to ask you? My father left a full Rockefeller Foundation grant at the University of Chicago to go work for Dr. King, a semester shy of getting his master's in divinity. Dr. King, who had a PhD, and they were all very, very much into education, he said, look, you need to come with me. And my father looked at him like he was nuts. He said, wait, you have a PhD. And black ministers of a particular ilk went to the top white seminaries, and they went to the top black seminaries, and they were very well educated. They were theologically very sound. Dr. King said, I can teach you more about theology than you will ever learn in that seminary. Come with me. That was a good thing because he only had 2.5 more years to live. And so my father went. Right. He and my mother made the decision to go for $75 a week, because it was a decision that my mother and father had to make, because he was a young married seminarian with a wife and 3 children under 2. Because Jesse and Johnny are 10 months apart. And the harassment that they had to endure, the lies that they read in the newspaper. Newspapers all over the country. They had a fight. And then to watch him murdered while you're talking to him. People who were in the Lorraine Motel who had their doors open on the first floor, who had their doors open, who were getting ready to come downstairs so they could go to Reverend Kyle's house for dinner. They said they thought they heard a missile. So they were my Uncle Gary, who's now passed on, he was on his bed. He hit the floor. He said, we thought there was a missile attack. Dr. King was killed by a missile, not by a bullet.
Interesting.
And he was killed by a lot of lies. A lot of lies.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, I'll look for the email on Andrew Young.
We'll find out.
Interesting to us. Okay, great. And thanks again for having me on.
Of course, thank you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you. Sending you.
Good to hear from him. All right.
Oh, sending you much love. Thank you, everybody. Love you, love you, love you. See you tomorrow.